Hello, I'm Cris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. How do you define the term elder abuse? Do you think it's something that happens in bad nursing homes? Well, you're partly right, but the problem is much, much bigger than that. The National Center on Elder Abuse estimates that nearly 10% of the elderly population will experience some type of abuse. And that's just an educated guess, because most abuse cases go unreported. Tonight we'll discuss the scope of the problem and see how local agencies are responding to elder abuse.
Elder abuse is a type of mistreatment that occurs among older adults, and it has to do with the vulnerabilities that happen as we age, so that we become more vulnerable to abusive actions due to physical and cognitive and emotional changes that happen with aging.
So it can be physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. Generally, the abuser is someone in a close, ongoing, trusted relationship with the older adult, someone like a spouse, a partner, an adult child, another family member, a caregiver, or someone who's come into the life of that older adult.
From a good study done by some colleagues in New York, it looks like in their estimate, about 1 in 23 cases is actually reported. So a lot of people think about it as we think about icebergs, which is that 2/3 or more is really below the surface.
At age 72, Willie Watson was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. His daughters put him in an assisted living facility, but the ever-increasing costs became prohibitive. Willie was moved into a smaller private home that had been converted into an assisted living facility, housing 6 residents. This home was less costly, but Willie's daughters soon found out that this affordability came at a high price.
So within about 30 days of my dad being there, he just went down. His health degraded such where he was not walking. He walked in there, but 30 days later he was not walking, not mobile at all. There were signs that I got throughout his 30 days that, intuitively just didn't feel right for me. Why am I waiting at the door? Why am I ringing the doorbell for 5 minutes and you're not answering? And I know you're there. Food, empty plate of supposed food, but there was no food odor in the room. So, they were staging. They were staging it for my visits. Visiting time was between, 9 and 5. You can't come in the evenings. You need to call before you come, that kind of thing. So there were red flags that I got. So, after I was done and convinced that something was wrong, I called an ambulance. I had an ambulance service to come get him, and I took him straight to the hospital. We were there for about a week. He was dehydrated, bed sores, the body was just really, had deteriorated a lot.
The anger that Terica felt turned to frustration when she tried to report her father's experience after the fact to the authorities. The State Health Service, the police department, and the district attorney's office told her they couldn't take action because her father was no longer in imminent danger.
No one even opened a case for me. They knew what the law stated, and they knew that it wasn't going anywhere, so they didn't even bother to open a case. I had pictures, I had, hospital records, doctor's notes, documenting what they saw once I brought him to the hospital, but it's just in a file now, so.
Willie Watson is now in a new assisted living facility, and Terica is comfortable that her father is being treated well. But her anger and frustration remains.
For me, when it comes to family, I'm like a pit bull. And I think most people are very protective of their family members. So it was frustrating to have those type of emotions, but no resolution or justice. So very frustrating.
This is the cautionary tale of Donald McClurg, a decorated World War II veteran, a college graduate. He became a successful sales executive after the war and built a comfortable life and a family with 3 children. All of them would grow up to become lawyers. In 2009, Donald lost his wife to cancer. While living in Florida at age 93, he was befriended by a 38-year-old woman who told him that she too had cancer, but didn't have the money for treatments. Over the course of a year, Donald McClurg gave her $90,000, almost half of his life savings. The woman was lying.
She was a proven con artist. She had 2 other complaints filed against her with the same police department for elder exploitation that had never been prosecuted, which was one of the reasons she's been able to continue this, because these cases are so often underreported, and even when they're reported, they're very rarely prosecuted because of several reasons, but one is the victims don't make good witnesses.
This is one of the rare cases of elder financial abuse that was actually prosecuted. But it took the efforts of Andrew and his sister, who are both lawyers, a tenacious detective, and a willing prosecutor to convict this woman.
She pled guilty to a second-degree felony, made fairly substantial restitution. The prosecutor said it was the largest restitution he'd ever seen in a case like this, and this is the only type of case he prosecuted. But when you think about it, he gave her $90,000, he got back $50,000. She spent 2 days in jail, pled guilty to a felony, got probation, no jail time. And that was one of the most successful prosecutions in history. And it wasn't the prosecutor's fault, it's the nature of these cases.
In October of 2014, Florida enacted an elder abuse statute that uses the legal concept of permissive presumption of exploitation as a tool to convict con artists who prey on elderly victims. Andrew McClurg was one of the architects of that law.
If I had one central point to emphasize to everyone, it is, don't ever make the mistake of thinking your elder, your loved one, is immune from exploitation.
So how do we encourage greater reporting of elder abuse cases? How do we enforce the laws already on the books and write new ones to protect the victims and prevent victimization? And how do we address a problem that is so hidden from view? These are some of the questions that will be answered by the Coordinated Response to Elder Abuse Task Force, a 3-year initiative funded by the Plow Foundation. Recently, I sat down with representatives from 4 different agencies to discuss ways to address the problem of elder abuse. Kay Mosby is intake counselor at Adult Protective Services. Carrie Shelton is Assistant District Attorney for Shelby County. Deputy Chief Mike Ryall is with the Investigative Services Division of the Memphis Police Department. And Patti Totsi is Director of the Coordinated Response to Elder Abuse team. Who is being abused? Who's the most likely victim of abuse?
Really, we're looking at anyone who could be abused. Certainly those who live in long-term care facilities, those who are isolated are definitely more proportionately abused, as well as women. Those living in poverty and have some cognitive impairments are definitely at higher risk, but the reality is anyone could be at risk of being abused.
Patti really touched on, it's the isolation that appears to be the biggest indicator or the biggest gateway, because the more isolated a person is, the less likely they know, A, who to reach out to, but B, think that they can. So
if we define those at risk, who are the abusers? Who are the perpetrators of this?
Like Chief Ryall said, it's family members normally, sometimes it's neighbors. It's anybody who has access to this to somebody who's vulnerable and doesn't have the wherewithal to say, yes, this is okay, and no, this is not.
That explains why so many go unreported,
Yes.
if it's a family member. I mean,
that also explains, just like your first video, the cost is high. To get into a proper care home that's certified by the state, that's licensed by the state, that cost is huge. And when families start dividing the numbers, they love their parents, they love their family. But when they start looking at those huge costs, they try to find alternative means, so they slide into maybe an unlicensed situation which doesn't provide the proper care because they are balancing cost. So they're not really abusing people, but they place their family into a care home or a care facility that maybe is not monitored as well.
I want to talk about the roles that your organizations play in elder abuse. Let's just start with Adult Protective Services. What's the function of Adult Protective Services?
We are state mandated to investigate any type of allegation of abuse and or neglect, and that's even with just you suspecting it. We will take those calls or emails, faxes. As long as the information gets to us, then we're mandated to go out and make a face-to-face visit within the first 7 working days, and we have 1 to 60 days to complete our investigation. During part of the investigation, we try to determine whether or not those allegations are true, and then try to provide services to reduce the risk. And that's the major issue, is reducing the risk of that person continually being abused or neglected.
So you don't have to have proof. It's simply someone calls and says, I think
Yes.
this may be an abusive situation.
Yes.
And you can act on that.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let's talk about the police department.
It's real simple. We work with Adult Protective Services closely, but we do more totally the criminal side. Once we dissect a case, if we see that there is a criminal element there, then we work with the Attorney General's office to pursue prosecution in that case. And that's mainly our driving force, is we make sure that bad guys go to jail when they abuse and hurt people.
Is it difficult to find the proof to take it to the prosecutor?
It can be. I'm thinking of a case locally where a father was lonely. His daily routine was to go to a restaurant where he became friends with the waitresses there, and they would tell him hard luck stories about their life, and he would do similar to that case study that you showed. He would start writing checks to these women. The daughter, fortunately, had a very strong control over the life and was able to monitor his bank account, saw a huge depletion of funds, so she quickly got the police involved in that situation and was able to resolve it. But it takes that overseeing. It takes somebody in your life to oversee your activity. Seeing risk factors is not difficult. We all know what's bad and we all know what's good generally. But the good rule of thumb, if you see something that appears bad, it probably is, so you need to report it to somebody.
And the role of the prosecutor?
The district attorney's office, our job is to present cases in criminal court and in general sessions where there is a suspicion that the law's been broken, and then if necessary, we put it in front of a jury and ask a jury to decide. To toss in there with the abuse and reporting it, it actually is a requirement that if you suspect the abuse, financial exploitation, neglect, any of the above of a vulnerable adult, you must report it. Everybody is a mandated reporter, and to not do so, to fail to do so, is actually punishable by 11 months and 29 days in jail. That's generally not the issue. Most people think that that's not their position or not their place to call. And the good news about that is that, and Ms. Mosby can explain that a little bit more, they can do so anonymously. And that's to protect them, and they guard that fiercely. And so even if Chief Ryall and I go in and ask pretty please, they will not turn that information over to us without a court order. So that is a good thing to remember, and we have to have investigations done before we can begin a prosecution. People would start screaming if I pulled people in off the street and just threw them in jail.
Well, I was about to say, if finding the proof is difficult, then it must be also difficult to prosecute someone.
They are hard cases. They are.
Because, like, for example, in the case of Donald McClurg, where you had a case that, is this a gift when he writes this check? Is it a loan? She probably said, oh, well, he gave me the money. How do you prove it?
Well, even we can take it even more simple than that. Is we're dealing with people who are older, some people who have longer lifespans, some people who don't. But by the time we get the information and the time we are able to file charges, chances are that our victim may either have a change in mental status where we wouldn't be able to use them as a witness, or they're just no longer available, period. And if we can't have a victim in a theft situation, is what it would be, to say, I didn't mean that when I gave it to them, then it really does complicate matters for us. We pursue it in different ways, but that truly is the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, in the piece, Andrew McClurg, he wrote the law article, and eventually a law was passed in Florida with the concept of permissive presumption of exploitation. Is that kind of law, do we need some kind of law like that on the books in Tennessee?
I'd love to see something like that. It certainly would help things if we had a law like that, but also understanding that when we ask our legislators to enact those laws, that they're concerned about suspects and victims at the same time.
Sure.
But yes, that sounds like a fantastic law, and certainly one that I'd love to take for a spin, but that's not what we have.
Well, from your standpoint, have you got enough teeth in the law to work with? Do you need more?
I would love to see more. That would be fantastic.
Well, we talked a lot about the problem. Let's talk a little bit about what we hope, I think, will be a solution, the coordinated response to elder abuse. Now, this is a 3-year grant from the Plow Foundation.
Yes.
Tell me about what this initiative is, what it hopes to do.
The goal is to protect older adults by creating a coordinated response to elder abuse. So this response offers 24/7, so around-the-clock health care, 24/7 advocacy, and emergency housing as needed for those who are 60 and older who are potentially victims of abuse. And so in addition to those services that are provided, there's also legal services and a public guardian that are funded by the Plow Foundation. And what we do as a group is get together at least on a weekly basis as a team of individuals to make sure that none of these potential victims are falling through the cracks. We learned and have learned nationally and even locally, this isn't just about one agency resolving these issues. Bringing the agencies together to work together is really a key component, and that is what the coordinated response to elder abuse is intended to do.
I'd like to hear from some of you about your reaction to this, to the idea of coordinating the response. Are we going in the right direction? Is this going to be a solution to an issue?
It is definitely a solution, because for adult protective services, there's never been a one-stop shop kind of concept to call and say, I have a person who needs housing and they need someone to help them straighten out their finances due to financial exploitation. Say they've lost a house, because of foreclosure. So we've never had that before. So a lot of times our counsel will have to make several calls for each case, trying to get services or find out what agencies provide those services. I think here we've had agencies to do it, but everybody was doing it in an isolation, so nobody knew what the other agency was doing and what they needed and how their procedures were. So with this kind of answers it all.
Okay. Now, this is a 3-year grant. Mm-hmm. What do you hope to achieve in 3 years? What do you want things to look like 3 years from now?
There's 3 different factors. One is we're looking at creating a coordinated response, and with the services that are provided, we're also offering system change. So we're going to take a look at policies and procedures to coordinate with one another. We want to make sure that the coordinated response team agrees with the decision, so that this effort is done together as a group. And we also want to make sure that there's ultimately victim-centered services, victim safety that's provided, and that they're pleased with the services that are being offered.
Do any of you know, in your experience, if there's anything similar operating in other cities where they've got programs in place, or perhaps laws like the one we've seen in Florida, that are making positive steps toward helping correct this problem?
The good news is, around the country, there's been work that's been done in various areas. So New York has an incredible program with regards to housing. Out in California, they have an incredible healthcare center of excellence with regards to the medical piece. So there are lots of people around the country that have services. I do not believe that there's any one entity or community who's doing all the pieces that we are doing here in the Memphis market. And that has been validated by some of the technical advisors that we are using at a national level to advance the work that we're doing and making sure that we are using best practices and innovative ways to respond to abuse.
Well, let's talk about the future, because even beyond 3 years of the grant, because we all know the baby boom generation is growing up. In 15 years, 20% of the population is going to be over 65. We've never faced that in America. Don't know what that's going to look like. What kind of impact is that going to have on this elder abuse issue?
Well, one of the statements I always like to make, if we compare elder abuse to child abuse, and there's definitely different nuances to each, but essentially there's been a lot of work on the child abuse perspective. And we can learn a lot from the processes and protocols that have occurred over the years, and the funding and the policies and the laws that have been enacted. So my perspective, adult protective services and services for older adults is 30 to 40 years behind that which has been in action with children. So I think we do have a ways to go, and there needs to definitely be increased funding for adult protective services around the nation as well as locally. But I think there's some really good models out there that have been tested.
I think anything that we do that brings more attention to the issue of elder abuse can only benefit Memphis and Shelby County. We have a very high, we've got high crime rates and things like that, but we also have some really good people who work here, and people who in each agency that we have who really want to make sure that things are in place as we get older, because we've said it over and over again, it's there, we're going to be there soon, so we want to make sure that everything is set up and working well. We have advantages in that our office and law enforcement work very closely together. That's not something you often see. We have advantages in that Adult Protective Services is wanting to work and make things better. And we've got advantages that we've got a fantastic foundation here in the city who wants to see things change. And so all the pieces are together. It's just a matter of learning what everybody else does, how they do it, and making sure that it is available for everyone to use. And we are certainly in a good spot for that to happen. It is very impressive. We would never have even anticipated something like this several years ago, and now this is what we have. It's very cool.
And I know that the Plow Foundation, as the director of the Coordinated Response to Elder Abuse, we are planning past 3 years. So as we're doing the work current day, we're also looking at sustainability so that this work continues in longevity.
And the biggest thing would be that we continue to bridge those gaps in services so nobody else falls through, nobody else is at any longer risk because they don't have services in order to reduce those things.
And I think what you said, Chris, a minute ago, with the older population growing, we better make our footprint now versus wait so that we can be ready for that process as it does grow. There's nothing better for a Memphis police officer at 3 o'clock in the morning, knocking on the door, sensing that there's abuse going on, but really doesn't have the knowledge or the education to really make that identification proper, but knowing that he or she has a team they can call that move immediately. And that makes a huge difference already. And this is just beginning. So we're starting to see some positive outcome from this new effort that we're putting in place right now.
Well, perhaps we will become a model for other cities to follow in the future. I want to thank all of you for being on The Best Times. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Although the CREA initiative has only just begun its work, it's already producing results. And it's hoped that the success of this program can be the model for other similar programs throughout the country. If you want more information about elder abuse, go to the websites of the National Center on Elder Abuse or the Administration on Aging. And if you want to report a suspected case of elder abuse, contact Adult Protective Services. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. I'm Cris Hardaway. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by